Good afternoon and welcome to Birth to Net Worth, episode 5. Jesse, how you doing?
Dude, I am doing amazing. We got the salmon run right around the corner, so I'm getting ready to get out and do some camping and do some fishing and some more real estate, obviously.
Fantastic. That sounds awesome. What's the weather like up there?
It's a
Mid-60s?
whopping 60 degrees, bro.
Marvelous. That sounds perfect. We're at 100 degrees right here.
Oh my gosh, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, not
Yeah,
kidding.
that's no for me, dog. I don't even know what to do with 100 degrees.
Well, we got somebody awesome today. We got Maria Baginski. She is a fixer and a flipper and a mama and a great lady to know. She's got a background from one of the mentorships that some of our friends have been part of. And she's going to talk to us about her passion for financial literacy for kids. So let's bring her in.
Marie, what's going on? How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing today?
Wonderful.
Phenomenal.
Awesome. Well, like Trystan said, it's 100 degrees here in Arizona, so it's lovely.
Oh my gosh. You know what? 75, just so you know, 75 degrees in Alaska is like the equivalent of 100 degrees down there. Just so you know. So here in another couple degrees, I'll be feeling your guys' pain.
I'm sure it is.
I've already got the AC on. We're already kind of cooking.
The igloo is melting.
That's right. The igloo is melting.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Marie, give us a little bit of background. You've done fortune builders, you've done a bunch of other things, but tell us about your childhood. Your, where you come from. What did you learn in life, and tell us about your experiences.
Yeah, so I am originally from New York, Staten Island, New York, to be exact. So if you ever watched, Jersey Shore back in the day, I'm sure you've seen and heard what typical Staten Islanders sound like. I grew up, my mom's side of the family are all immigrants from Italy. So I grew up with a hardcore Italian background. My dad's family has been here for a long time, but my parents did get divorced when I was young. So I grew up primarily with my mom's side of the family. And yeah, it's actually interesting. I heard expressions like money doesn't grow on trees. And like, what do you think? We're made out of money? Like, these are the typical things I grew up hearing. So yeah, it was definitely different than living the life out here in sunny Arizona. That's for sure.
Interesting. Oh, I read that you had 14 years of experience as a professional engineer.
Yes. So interestingly enough, I actually went to high school for performing arts and started singing opera when I was 12 and got into college as a music major. And somehow freshman year of college decided that I wanted a real degree. So I said, I could always go audition for a Broadway show, but they don't care if I have a degree. So let me not waste my time in college. And so I switched into the engineering program and I got a degree in electrical engineering.
Wow. Interesting. So you sing though still, right? You do? What kind of music are you into?
Honestly, a little bit of everything. Right now I sing at church on Sundays. It's like contemporary Christian rock type of stuff.
For real?
Hymns. I actually, about 5 years ago, I sang at Carnegie Hall with a choir. And that was singing like folk style music. But really everything. I still like to sing classical Andrea Bocelli when I'm in the car by myself, but my kids are like, Mommy, that's too loud.
That's probably the best time to sing that.
Yeah. And then like, regular pop, hip hop, what's famous on the radio, a little bit of everything.
Man, that's awesome. Okay. Well, before we end, we're probably going to have you belt out a verse or something of Living on a Prayer.
Okay.
There's some Bon Jovi up here.
Why not?
I love it. So how do you go from 14 years of engineering experience to real estate? What does that transition look like? I mean, you gave us a little bit of an insight into, what your childhood was, some of the things that you heard growing up about money, what your parents told you. How does this transition happen?
Honestly, it was really crazy. So I graduate with my degree in engineering and I decided like if I had rich parents, they would pay for me to like go backpacking through Europe for a year. But I don't. So I said, I have to figure out how to do something cool before I go get an engineering job. And so I actually went and worked for Club Med for 6 months. I like got that job while I was still finishing up my senior year in college. So I was like bartending. I was always like hustling and working again because I had to figure out how to pay for everything on my own. So bartended all through college, bartended in the summers in New York, and then got this job where they are bartending in Club Med in Cancun. So like, what's better than that? So I literally
Hard knock life, right?
I graduate with my engineering degree, and 3 days later, I'm on a flight to Mexico. And so
Nice.
I worked there for 6 months. And I think a lot happened when I was there, just traveling and meeting people that were traveling to the resort. Somebody there, told me about Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And, you got to read this book and you got to like see what else is out there. So eventually I did that for 6 months. And then some of the people that I met there, we went to Tahoe and did 6 months in the winter snowboarding in Lake Tahoe, and then eventually got back to New York. And the first thing I did when I got back to New York was read Rich Dad, Poor Dad and sign up for the Real Estate Wealth Expo, which was at the Jacob Javits Center in New York City.
Wow.
So it was 2005, I think, my first Real Estate Wealth Expo through the Learning Annex. And the keynote speakers that year were literally Robert Kiyosaki, Donald Trump, and Tony Robbins.
Wow. Just beginners in the business.
Yeah, just no, nobodies. But they had all these different speakers and all these different educators, and there were topics on marketing, on real estate, on all these different breakout rooms. And, I ended up buying like somebody's like marketing boot camp. It was actually Than Merrill and the Fortune Builders when he first started. I remember I bought like a backpack that just had his marketing stuff on CD-ROM, like old school DVDs. It was like Word files you could upload into your computer and edit. And so, at the same time, I had no money. So I still had to go get a job. So I worked, I got an engineering job. It was a great fallback career. But as I was starting my engineering career, I was also starting to learn about real estate. And so slowly, I would be that weird engineer, like at lunch talking about properties and these houses that I want to buy and flip. And like all the engineers I worked with are like, what are you talking about? Like we're working on bridges and tunnels. Like, what are you talking about? Houses? So, yeah.
Amazing. So from which, obviously you got a side of the family that were immigrants when, and a side that weren't. What were the differences in their sort of mindsets and attitudes towards money, and which did you kind of swing closer towards from, the influence that was involved?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, my grandparents specifically, like they lived through the Great Depression, right? Like my grandfather became a citizen of this country specifically because he joined up the army during World War II. So they were very much like just like savers, right? Like penny pinchers, savers. They did, though, buy a couple of buildings in Brooklyn. So they were savvy enough to start being landlords. But they still had that mentality of like, go to school, get a good education, get a good career, So that's probably what pushed me to do engineering in the first place. I knew it was going to be like a solid career. Mm-hmm. But they did definitely, I have an uncle who owns a 80-unit apartment building in Brooklyn, and my uncle passed away, but my aunt still owns that building. So I did get to start like seeing some of that, and I knew like that was my rich uncle, like that guy that owned the building, like he had lots of fancy cars and like knew everyone. As opposed to, my other family members who were just working really hard at different types of jobs. And so I think, just seeing that even at a young age, like I knew that there was something to that. Like, I mean, and the funny thing is he was still such a penny saver. Like he would drive to the other side of Staten Island to go get a bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich for $1.25 because he knew that it was only $1.25 over there and he didn't want to pay $4 at the corner store. But he, he even lived in the building. So he lived in one of the 80 units, but he was like,
Right.
it's really easy for everyone to find me. They know where to come to pay their rent. So it was definitely interesting to like grow up with that perspective. And then, my dad, even though my parents are divorced, I still spent plenty of time with my dad, and my dad just worked a typical, 9 to 5 and had very typical struggles. And I think even now, as he's older and retired, and, he was able to move down to Myrtle Beach, but they own their house outright. And I think that they're happy that they do, because, they are living off Social Security, and my stepmom working part-time, paycheck to paycheck. So that's not any way that I want to retire.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. So you had influences from, savers to multifamily apartment building owners and everything in between, it seems, as well, probably with the other family members.
Yeah.
Took on some real estate training. What was the sort of the first action that you started taking in the real estate side of things?
So the first thing we did, interestingly enough, was bought a rental property. So we bought what was 2 bungalows on the same lot back in Staten Island. Bought it as first-time home buyer. Intention was to live in one unit and rent out the other unit. And I still think that that's a great strategy for people today, because I was able to put down 3% first-time home buyer loan, So I really knew that cash flow was going to be king. So we started out, that was our first rental. And then we did a flip, which I was just telling somebody about this story. I think you guys will get a kick out of it. Our first flip that me and my husband did, which we were just dating back then. So luckily we made it through that and still ended up getting married. But it took us almost 4 years. Yeah, 4 years to complete our first flip.
Wow.
So,
was that just hiccups with the actual rehab itself, or was that kind of you two are learning how to be business partners as well as romantic partners and all that kind of stuff? Like what was kind of some of the things that played into that?
Yeah,
Is there a learning curve on?
Yeah, I mean, we're both working, right, at that time. I'm working full time. He's a New York City firefighter working full time. And we're going to these, classes, and like I said, the Real Estate Wealth Expo, we went a couple years in a row. We started getting like these tips and tricks, but we really didn't have the money to invest in one of the full-on programs. So we're just like taking these little nuggets, and then they were like, we'll figure it out on our own, right? So we're like trying to save money and cut corners, like do work ourselves. We did hire a contractor who ended up literally taking, like, he was like, oh, I'm ordering all your new windows this weekend. Can you write me a check for $5,000? That includes this nice big bay window for the front and all this other stuff. Well, we wrote him that check for $5,000 and he never showed up again.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah. And we didn't know any better. We thought we knew him. He was a friend of a friend. We didn't have the contracts. We didn't have, him fill out a W-9. Like, we didn't know anything.
Right.
So that was a big setback, obviously. And then we were doing a bunch of work, and that same contractor told us, well, you're just doing interior renovations. You don't really need to pull permits for it. So we're like, okay, great. And we're doing all this work. He walks away with a check, never comes back. And about a week later, the building department shows up and says, well, you're doing all this work without a permit. So New York City building department is not one to be messed with. We got a stop work order. Couldn't do any more work. And it took us 14 months between finding an architect, getting drawings, and getting those permits pulled and the stop work order lifted. It was 14 months.
Wow.
So yeah, lots of lessons learned. We ended up putting so much money into it. I had to go take out a 401k loan. My husband and boyfriend at the time took out an early pension loan. But You know what? The craziest thing was like we could have given up at any point. At any
Yeah.
one of those things, we could have been like, forget it. This real estate thing just isn't working out. Let's just focus on our careers. We both are making decent money, you know. But somewhere inside us, like we just knew that this was gonna be the future for us. Like we knew working that regular full-time job wasn't going to give us the same financial freedom and independence to really do what we want to do and live the way we want to live. So we stuck with it, but it was crazy, guys. So it sounds like you're probably still like, wait a minute, how does this take 4 years? This still doesn't sound like 4 years. Well, we got it all done. I got my real estate license on the side, so I was so happy. I got my first listing. It's my own property. I just flipped it. We're going to sell this. It's going to be amazing. We show it. We get a couple people through the door. This one girl's like super psyched about it. It's this little like 2-bed, 1-bath, 800 square foot little bungalow, right? And she's like, I just got a job up the block. This is going to be amazing. She's like, but there's this big storm coming this weekend, so I'll write you the offer on Monday. I'm like, okay. That big storm was Hurricane Sandy.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness.
No lie, that house was under 5 feet of water and we couldn't even get to it for 3 days.
Oh,
Wow.
no.
No access, nothing. I
Wow.
mean, we have pictures of this house buried underwater, and just all of that work that we just completed, we now didn't have proper insurance. So that's a whole nother
Oh
story.
wow.
Oh my goodness, Marie.
And so that house, I mean, it's just a nightmare if you think about everything that happened. But
Yeah.
we had to so we flipped our first house twice. So we had to rebuild it a whole second time. New kitchen cabinets, new flooring, everything 6 feet up to 6 feet had to be completely replaced. So electrical wiring behind the walls, just, I mean, everything. It was such a mess. So to do the work again, and then it took us, I think, about another 8 or 9 months to complete the work, but then it still took us another like 4 or 5 months. Nobody wanted to move in that area. Like now it was a flood zone. Everything had to be built to like above the 100-year flood line, which it wasn't. It was just crazy. So we didn't end up selling it until about a good 14, 15 months after Hurricane Sandy.
Good grief.
What a story. Oh my
Yeah, that's
gosh.
amazing.
I can't imagine anything else bringing you and a spouse closer together than going through having to rebuild your house twice. That is insane. My wife, we bought a camper a couple years ago, and she's got a little thing written on the camper that says marriage is staying together even after you back in the camper. I don't know if you've ever tried to back in a camper with your spouse before, but I can attest to that. But I have not rehabbed a house with my spouse, so I'm going to have to default to you on that. That is crazy. Wow.
Yeah. And literally within that time, we finished the work. We moved to Arizona. We started a flip in Arizona, and I think we started it, finished it, and sold it before we got paid back on that house in New York. So it was just the craziest experience. But like you said, we lived through it. We're definitely closer for it. And you know, I think the biggest thing was the mindset. Like no matter what obstacle came in our way, and there were so many obstacles, we were just like, we're gonna figure this out. We're gonna get through it. We're gonna do it. It's okay. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. And that was like our saying, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Well, that's a great seg because I think talking about mindset around money, and I know you're hugely passionate, like I am, about bringing financial literacy to kids. Mm-hmm. We've had some deep conversations, the last few weeks, particularly over the last few months as well. Tell us what it was that kind of sparked your interest in that. Was it being a mother? Was it just being aware that what you learned when you're a child wasn't necessarily quite the best thing through discovering other things? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I think, becoming a parent definitely changes your life. Once you have kids, everything, the way that you think completely changes, whether it's about money, time, everything becomes a little bit different. And, the other thing I haven't shared yet, but my husband has a heart condition. And we found out when he was 26 and he's 42 now. And we've had plenty of scares with just really not knowing how long he's going to be around. And, now thinking about possibly being a widow or a single mom of 2 young boys, it was very important for me to leave that career, leave that 9 to 5, really having the freedom that I know I can always go back and be an engineer and make enough money to take care of my kids, but then I also would not see my kids, right? I'd have to have that full-time job and income. And so for me, it was about like, I have to learn how to really, we did real estate again. I felt like it was our side hustle for so long, but we really had to like put it on the front burner and say, okay, this is what we're going to focus on. This is how we're going to make our money, so that it gives me the freedom to do whatever I need to take care of my kids, because he might not always be here and it will be just left on me. And then with that, it was like, now also, how do I teach that to my kids? Right.
Yeah.
We live in such a different world today than what even, we grew up in. And so, we were talking a little bit real quick, Jesse, earlier about like my kid on YouTube, right? And he's making YouTube videos of my property tours. And I didn't even have to prompt him. And he's just like, slap that like button and make sure you subscribe to his stream. And I'm like, oh my goodness, because he's watching YouTube, right?
No.
And it's amazing nowadays, there's so many ways to make money. And so I realized the more I got training and the more I did personal development, and I've been through Tony Robbins trainings and NLP classes for myself. And I'm like, so much of it stems from your mindset, what you're taught, what you hear. And I don't want to teach my kids the same things that I was taught. I don't want them to ever hear me say, we can't afford this. I talked about being Italian. I thought we ate pasta like 7 days a week because we were Italian. I later realized it was because my mom made $12,000 a year and had 4 kids, and pasta is the cheapest way to feed 4 kids, right?
Wow.
So there's so much that if you can teach kids early enough, before that their mind is really, shifted and jaded to those old school thoughts of money doesn't grow on trees, right? What do you think? I'm made out of money. The things that we heard our parents say to us, if we can teach that to our children while they're still young, and teach them the fact that in today's day and age, there's so many ways to make money. You don't have to go to college. You don't have to go get a good career. You don't have to become a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, right? You can be a YouTuber and make millions of dollars. Like, that's crazy.
Yep.
So, just making sure that kids are aware of it, that there's so many different things that they can do to make money. And then, Trystan, I think I started telling you recently that the more I talk about it, it's not even just the kids that need to hear this. It's
parents. The parents aren't literate themselves to be able to teach their kids. And I think there's a lot of shame in the parents that they don't know how to teach their kids. They feel stuck. And you're absolutely right. I was having a conversation with Travis yesterday, and the same thing came up. It's the parents that we need to start with, which is, I think, why it makes even more sense to have this podcast aimed at parents, to aid them to find things to help their kids, but also to become financially literate themselves and figure out not only, budgeting, day-to-day type stuff. And, we probably want to do some case studies with some people if they're open to it. I mean, there's profit first for businesses, as we very much know, but the author wrote this book called My Money Bunnies, which is author of Profit First, kind of dumbing it down for kids. But none of this is complicated. 3 different jars for one-time money, sometime money, and anytime money. It's the same for us as grown-ups. We could put Profit First or a limited version of that in, but it's simple to do, but it's not simple to kind of translate into a working life. And
Right.
I think that's why it's so important for us to be able to educate the parents so that when the kids are elementary age, they start with that thinking that that's normal, because it should be normal, where they understand money. They don't necessarily hear we can't afford it, but maybe you don't need it is the thing they should be hearing,
Right.
rather than we can't have it, or you can't have it, or we can't afford it, whatever that is. But when they understand that at the age of 5 to 8 years old, they can do something with their money. They can have delayed gratification instead of instant gratification, which is another huge issue with marketing and society. And none of these things are helping the financial literacy. They're all getting us into bad debt instead of good debt, and it's causing people to make decisions that they're not really even aware that they're making, and the reasons they're making them. So putting together a platform where the elementary, the high school, junior high, the high school kids can have different levels of entry point where they can pick it up running. But obviously, the earlier they get it, the easier it is for their parents to translate into the parents' lives, because if they see it in that very simple way, they can then get their head around, oh, shit, this is expendable income, this is bills, and this is holiday or vacation money, and this is kind of money that, will go away once every couple of months, or, do something special, whatever that might be, So I think setting the agenda with the kids is going to help the adults itself. What products are you aware of as far as, self-directed IRAs, whole life policies, that kind of thing, which we as adults can look into? And again, there's not the vast majority of people that are aware of these. Most people have 401ks, which are pre-tax retirement accounts, of which they're taxed when they remove the money. Whereas with the self-directed and the Roths, I believe that, certainly with the Roths, you put in post-tax dollars and you're never taxed on it when it comes out. You can make whatever return you get, and that's effectively tax-free because you already paid the tax on the way in. What are you aware of that we could make available to an 8 or a 10-year-old? Not necessarily that they're necessarily aware of it, but the parent could open it on their behalf as a kind of a custodian and start putting $5 or $10 a week, a month away for them, if that's something they can afford, which is their one-day money, or maybe just another layer of that when they get to junior high, when they can kind of get that concept. That way, once they get to 18, 21 years old, they've already got a substantial savings plan, in place for retirement. Hopefully it's self-directed as well, so they can invest in other things that bring a solid return.
Yeah, and I think you can definitely do that with whole life insurance, because the parent can have it on behalf of their child. And then, the key is just like teaching your kids some of the basic things, right? So, because if you just do it on behalf of your kid, they're not learning anything unless you're taking them along for the ride.
Yeah.
So even for me right now, taking my kids to go see the properties while we're fixing and flipping it, and teaching them about that construction process early on. So they do shoot a video where they're like, oh, there's a hole in the floor. I think there's going to be a bathroom here. I'm like, that's right. Like, we're putting in plumbing that comes before the toilet. You got to keep your kids engaged. And if whatever you're interested in, your kids are going to be interested in. They will genuinely be interested in it.
100%.
So I think the big thing is just engaging your children in whatever it is. So, my sister bought Disney stock for her kids with their savings accounts when they were younger. She was like, we're not going to keep your money in a savings account. Let's go buy something, and let's buy something that's fun and engaging for you.
Yeah.
And she took her kids to Disney World every year, so they knew what Disney was. And she's like, let's go invest that money in stock. You can own part of Disney. Like, her kids thought that was the coolest thing, right? So make sure that whatever it is, and I say that because I don't know a lot about stocks. I 100% do a lot of real estate investing as my strategy, but I have Airbnbs as well and long-term rentals. So my boys come with me to these different properties. They understand. I just did a video with my younger son the other day where Sebastian, he's 6 years old. I said, Sebastian, what's an asset? And he's like, an asset puts money in your pocket. And I'm like, okay, what's a liability? A liability takes money out of your pocket. But if I can have these conversations with my 6-year-old, now my 8-year-old, he's at the next level. So my video of my 8-year-old that I got to post, which is actually funny because I said to him, Christian, is a house an asset or a liability? And he said, Mommy, that's a trick question. And I said, why is it a trick question? He said, well, the house we live in is a liability because you and daddy pay all the bills. He said, but that house that we have on Hayden, that's an asset because it's a rental and they pay all the bills and it puts money in your pocket.
Nice.
Woo!
Right? Now, who's teaching their kids that at 6 and 8 years old?
Yeah.
Nobody.
Because they don't know. I didn't know.
Right? Like you have to teach that. And, you know, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is the best thing. We do have cash flow for kids. So I'll play that with my kids. You know, they're learning that there's bills that have to be paid and they can buy assets that can pay those bills for them just by playing that game. So, you know, we played Monopoly growing up, but this is a way more practical version of Monopoly because you see, you know, what those assets and what those liabilities are, you know, with other things other than just real estate. So Monopoly is all real estate, right? You want to take those greenhouses, turn them into red hotels.
Yeah.
Now we can actually look at it and say, oh, you made money through, I think they have a card actually in the game that says something like you made money through like your YouTube channel or some other like marketing type thing.
Nice.
So it really is, you know, just start getting them interested. And, you know, the big thing, like you said, is the problem is usually the parents. The parents aren't educated themselves. So we have to educate the parents so that they can help educate their kids. And I mean, I can put out the products and like you said, you can have them read that book. And if the parent doesn't understand it though, the kid's just going to look up right to mommy and daddy and be like, but what did I just read? Like, what is this?
What does that mean? How do I do that?
Mean? Right. And if the parents don't understand it, then how are they going to explain that to the kids? So I think we really have to educate the parents so that they can start helping their kids.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, it's really interesting. You said I mean, mindset is such a big part of this.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think for a lot of parents, I heard an analogy that like kind of when you kind of are changing your mindset, you kind of start surrounding yourself with different people. There's that transitional process that you go through. Right. And, there's a lot of people that, you know, will tell you, why are you doing that? Don't do that. That's risky. You shouldn't be doing that. You need to stay at a 9 to 5. There's a great analogy I heard. I don't remember where I heard it from, but it's kind of like crabs in a bucket. You heard this analogy?
Yes.
When one crab tries to get out, what do the rest of the crabs do?
Just pull them down.
Pull them on down. And it's not ill-willed. It's not, you know what I mean? It's not that they don't want him to get out. It's just kind of a natural habitual thing. And I think when parents tell their kids, I know this was kind of my mindset before I, you know, dove into real estate and started surrounding myself with people doing what I want to be doing. You know, when I told my kids, you know, we couldn't afford that early on, it wasn't from a place of ill will or anything like that. It was like, I'm trying to get my kids to think and to save and to, you know, be thrifty with their money. But at the same time, it's such a scarcity mindset that people do not realize it.
Yeah.
You know, and
we've got to choose our words carefully. And I think that's where I was saying that we don't need that, or we don't need that right now. That can wait. Yeah. And I think that's really the direction we should go, because we can say, well, yeah, it could be afforded, but what are we going to lose out on by doing that, by taking that now for a short-term limited adrenaline rush or excitement rush, and then that toy just sits in the corner for months and months and months till it then became donated to wherever it goes, you know?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, and Jesse, I want to speak to something that you just said, because a lot of students, so I also coach, right? So I'm a real estate coach. I coach for one of the programs out here that teaches people how to flip houses. And I find that with my students that are learning how to flip houses, you know, the mindset is what holds them back. And my biggest thing to them is, who are you listening to? So like you just said, you want to start taking advice from someone who has already done what you want to do, or you want to start taking advice from the coach in the program that you just paid for. You don't want to go pay all this money to educate yourself and then still take advice from those friends that aren't getting educated,
Yep.
right? That you don't necessarily have to leave them behind. You can try and bring them with you, but if they're giving you bad advice, those are just not the people that you're going to take advice from
Right.
anymore.
Right.
So that's a big thing is, I hear a lot of people say, I'm scared, like I don't want to cut off my family or leave them behind, or these are my best friends since high school or whatever. And you don't have to cut them off, but they're just not the ones you take financial advice from anymore. Right.
Right.
But we can also be aware that we don't have to feel bad for the people that aren't working on themselves and aren't not being prideful, but we change levels. We just grow apart. It's as simple as that. It is great to know these people, and it's not to say rudely cut them out, but if it isn't a positive experience for both sides, they may see positive as seeing you because you're successful. They want to be around you.
Mm-hmm.
But the average 5 people you're spending time with, are they holding you back from finding the next more successful person that's going to move you and your life forward, which is not going to be any benefit to them?
Right.
100%, bro. And it's crazy. I don't think a lot of people realize this when they're telling their parents when they're telling their kids that, hey, we can't afford this. Like psychologically,
Yeah,
those kids are going to grow up thinking we cannot afford this. And it's going to be a lot harder to break that scarcity mindset and to kind of move over to more of an abundant mindset and be willing to take a risk and to bet on yourself and, be willing and open-minded to learn about money and debt and how to leverage those properly, into cash flowing assets, things that are going to make you financially free.
Yeah. And I encourage people to think about everything else that they say to their kids as well. Because again, mindset, I have friends I love near and dear to my heart. I don't pay my kids to do chores. And they're like, Marie, why don't you pay your kids to do chores? And I'm like, well, I haven't done tons of research on this, but I don't want my kid to be a garbage man. So I'm not paying him to take out the garbage. I don't want to train him that that's how you make money. Right. So I'm like, I'm definitely no expert in the field of psychology. So don't get me wrong. But, chores are like, they're a part of life. Like,
absolutely. You can't give a kid a certificate for turning up.
Right. If I don't take out the garbage, it's going to stink. So nobody's paying me to take out the garbage. I'm not paying you to take out the garbage. So I think things as simple as, should I pay my kids to do chores is a question that parents will ask me. And I'm like, well, I'd rather, incentivize my kids with other things than money for something like a chore. I mean, really, I don't give my kids anything to do chores. They just have to do them. Like they have to feed the cat or the cat's going to die. That's one of their chores. Like feed the cat, give the cat water, take out the garbage. These are just part of life things. I don't even call them chores. I just take out the garbage. It's time to do it.
Contribution to the household.
Right. And then, other things like I'd rather incentivize my kids with money to, read Rich Dad, Poor Dad for teens. I'll pay you for every book you read, on financial education or on mindset or so there's other ways that I would rather, incentivize my kids with money. Just because I think so many people get lackadaisical with that kind of things. Like we said, that's just a part of life, right? Like you have to put away the silverware if you want clean silverware in the drawer. So I'm not going to pay you to do that. I don't get paid to do that.
Right.
So,
well, like you said, what happens when they get older? What happens when they're 13, 14, 15 years old? Like, oh, well, I went and traded my time for mom and dad when I was little doing my chores and they paid me. If I want more money, what do I got to go do? Now I got to go get a job.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That is really neat.
Yeah.
So, and I told you too, Jesse, earlier that my kids are in a place called Code Ninjas right now. And you're like, what is a Code Ninja? I'm like, they are learning Scratch, JavaScript, and a bunch of other C++ and some languages that I haven't used yet in computer programming. But who knows? Maybe my kids will grow up to make their own apps. And my younger son right now is literally telling me he wants to be a video game designer when he gets older. So again, there's so many ways to make money and so many cool things that you could do.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, we've got a couple of minutes left, Marie. What would you think would be something you want to leave people with as far as something around money, whether it's mindset, it's something to help change their, because we really got to be aware, like Jesse said, about the choice of words, the intent, and also the behavioral training, the conditioning that we learn to be speaking some of these words as well, which just come across as, oh, we can't afford that. And it's not something we just thought about saying, I'm going to choose those words, because with mindset in every way, your awareness is what gives you flexibility.
Right.
And, the ability to grow and change, and being aware of the words, even after you say them. Well, it's not that we can't afford it, but we don't really need that right now. Even kind of correcting yourself, that helps you be aware yourself and allows the kid to think, oh, parents can make mistakes when they're saying things as well, or whatever that is, to allow them to reframe things in the future when somebody says, oh, I can't afford it. Oh, is it because you don't need it or you can't afford it? And they may also distinguish the things just through that kind of awareness,
Yeah. So I think, your unconscious mind, your subconscious, whatever you want to call it, is such a powerful thing. You spit out words before you think about it, right? So
yeah.
I have worked really hard lately to take that breath before I respond to my kids. And I now actually have talked to my kids about, okay, when mommy gets really upset and I yell at you for something, or I say something that I shouldn't say, I want you to call me out on it. I want them to make me aware of it, because like you said, sometimes you're doing it and you're not aware of it. So I have open and honest conversations with my kids about it. And I think if we can all start to just be more open and honest with our communication, that will free up a lot of, we get so caught up in, did I say the right thing? Did I do the right thing? We're worried about what other people think. Just be open and honest. My kids know that if I yell at them for something and I raise my tone of voice and it's just because I'm frustrated, I'm working on something and they interrupted me, maybe, that my son will call me out on it. And he's like, Mommy, you're not supposed to talk to me in that tone of voice, right? Like, did I interrupt you? Is this not a good time? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe like my kid knows that. But that's a big thing, so be conscious of it. And when you can, be conscious of it. So if you do spit out something and you did it incorrectly, the moment you become conscious of it, correct it. And let your kids know that you
absolutely
messed up, right? Let them know and let them call you out on it in the future. And then, my big thing that I just want to leave everyone with is write down your goals. Have some goals and write them down. Just the power of writing down your goals and telling them to someone. Tell them to a perfect stranger at Fry's one day when you're out doing your grocery shopping, or tell them to your significant other if you really feel comfortable with it. But I really, really do believe in the power of writing down goals and putting it out into the universe. You can't just say it over and over in your head. You got to speak it out. You got to write it down, because once you put that out into the universe, there will be a way that it will come back to you. One of my first real estate seminars, Robert Kiyosaki was on stage, and I remember him literally saying, why are you here right now? What is going to motivate you when the contractor walks away with $5,000, when Hurricane Sandy hits your house and you got to build it again, when all that shit hits the fan, right? He didn't really say all those things, but those all happened to me. Like, what's going to keep you going? And we wrote down goals, and he was like, don't write down financial freedom, because that doesn't mean anything, right? But I wrote down, I wanted to retire from my engineering career before I was 40. That was a big goal for me, just to be able to retire before I was 40. And, my husband at the time, and we were 24 and 26 when we were writing this down, guys. So, we were young, and he's 26 and he writes, I want a supercar by the time I'm 40. Of course, I want to retire. And he just wants like a Lamborghini. Of course, that's what every guy wants. Naturally. But, that one day that we just wrote down that goal and put it away. We never even thought about it afterwards. We really didn't. It wasn't something we kept. I know people say you write it down, the same goal every day, or keep bringing it out there. we wrote it down that one day. We shared it with each other. We put it away. And I retired 6 months before my 40th birthday, and he bought his Audi R8 right after his 40th birthday. And those were goals we wrote down 14, 16 years before. We didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
So, one thing that I just want to say is, the universe is a wonderful place. What you put out, you will get back in. So be careful of that, be careful of who you're getting that advice from. Like you were saying earlier, Jesse, right? The people that are telling you, be careful what you allow in your brain. Even with simple things like, Tony Robbins does this thing where he's like, close your eyes and picture an 80-year-old man. What does an 80-year-old man look like? And most people in the audience are visualizing their grandpa, right? And this old man that can't really walk or whatever it is. And then while you're all there with your eyes closed, he brings out like the healthiest 80-year-old man in the world that looks like he's like 45 and can like bench press me. And he's like, well, he's 80. And you're all like, what? He's 80? You don't even know that it's possible until you see it. And then you're like, that's what I want to be when I'm 80. So we have so many influences from when we're kids and what we think life should look like, what we think about money, what we think we're going to look like, right? Like, am I going to look like my grandmother when I'm 80 just because she's my grandmother? Honestly, I hope not, because my grandmother was not in good shape when she was 80. But now that I know that, I can go do some Google search and find some really hot 80-year-old women and be like, that's what I want to look like when I'm 80. So just be conscious of those types of things. Everything you think affects your mindset. So that's my big thing. Write down goals and see the world through different lenses.
Perfect.
I love it. Well, I just wrote down my goal again as we were sitting here, as you were saying that. So thank you. Appreciate that.
Well, awesome. Well, thanks so much, Maria. It's been a pleasure. I know we're going to do some great things together down here and put together panels and discussions and help each other with our causes. So hurry up and get your ass down here, Jesse.
Hurry up, Jesse.
I don't know about that. How about you guys come up here?
Don't come down in the next couple months. It's too hot. But
okay, yeah, I agree. I'll see you guys in November.
That's good.
Perfect.
Okay. Well, awesome. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's been so much fun chatting with you.
Pleasure.
Appreciate you. Thank you, Marie.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.